Team, sometimes you got to pull yourself out of the mud. About a year and a half ago, I had a thriving gym, a bustling community of people working to improve themselves, their relationships with their bodies, and their relationships with all of their loved ones. And then a 1,000-year flood came through our city and wreaked havoc. A lot of people lost their lives, lost their homes, and we suffered a lot of destruction of our sweet community. The day after the storm, I came down and I looked at the gym. It was covered in mud. There were cars piled up where we used to run in and out going on hill climbs. Most of the equipment we use is heavy enough to have stayed put. Quite a bit of it got swept into the backyard. And anything that floated ended up probably in Tennessee. After looking at the gym, I was numb. I was in shock. I went back to the house where I was living, where 30 100-foot pine trees had fallen all over the property, smashed two vehicles. And I went out back to where I would normally sit and do some work. And I had a plastic Adirondack chair that I would sit in. I usually had two of them, but one had got smashed. And so I sat in that one that was remaining. And I was so overwhelmed, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just sat quietly. My head was hung, and I was stuck in a place where I was grateful that I was alive, that everyone that I knew and loved was still alive and safe, and that I didn't know how I was going to get back to my work that I cherish so much, that I would be able to meet with people and guide people through their exercise journey. I didn't know how I would get back to that. The weight was heavy on my shoulders, and I was staring at the ground. And I realized that there was a little brick patio that I was sitting on, and it was covered in pine needles. All the trees that had crashed around had thrown pine needles all over. There were branches everywhere. And I thought, I can create a little bit of peace right here. Just this little corner of my world. And so I went inside and I got a broom and I brushed off that 4 foot by 6 foot brick patio. Surrounded by woods with horizontal trees, I created just a little bit of order. And it was hard to breathe thinking about how heavy and devastating this was for so many. And I had to sit back down. And I could instantly feel just a little bit easier having done one small thing. I didn't feel great. I didn't feel like I had made it. But I realized that just that one small piece made things a little bit better. It moved humanity a little bit closer to recovered. It showed that despite the destruction and chaos, we could move a little closer. And at that point, I decided to call on some friends. And I told them that we were going to meet and get whatever equipment we could out of the mud and salvage it. And we would see where we needed to go from there. And so on that day, surrounded by devastation, I pulled driftwood and debris out of these rings. And I decided I was going to see if I could do a muscle up. And so I reached up, I set the rings, I grabbed on, and I pulled myself up. And I didn't realize how big that metaphor was right then. I was pulling myself out of the mud. I was showing myself what was possible. Now, you need to understand that at that time I was 42 years old, and nearly 20 years ago, in my mid 20s, I watched some Olympians do muscle ups just like that. And I thought, wow, that's amazing for Olympians to do. And about a year later, I was on a website called CrossFit.com, and I saw a man at that time in his 40s do a muscle up as well. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really impressive for him. And as I continued over the weeks and months watching videos on that website, I saw many people, average people, doing muscle ups. And I became so inspired to get one myself that I started that path of working on it. Others asked me, hey, what are you doing? And I started showing them. And I turned that into a business. And over the last decade and a half, I've helped dozens get their first muscle up. Everything from single fathers to physician mothers and everyone in between. I found that these everyday people, these average people who would show up and do the work could make that kind of progress. And it's not just for Olympians. It's for all of us to realize that we can reach new heights, greater heights. Now, during that time coaching, I also saw quite a few people falter. And man, that wrecked me every time it happened. I felt infinitely responsible for everybody's faltering. I felt infinitely responsible for asking them to do something and them hurting themselves while doing it. Infinitely responsible, unbearably terrible. But I knew that if I just created absolute safety, I would just take away their ability to climb to those heights. And so I set and I made it my mission that for people to be able to achieve levels of success like that, they would have stepping stones, not leaps of faith, and that those stepping stones would be secure and progressive and lead them all the way there. So a year and a half ago, I did a muscle up, pulling myself out of the mud, 10 to 15 extra pounds on my body in those work boots and soaked Carhartts. And I spent the next 6 months working diligently to clean up that gym, to repair that gym. And during that time, used a lot of the physical fitness that I had built over the years and made the mistake of moving that sharpening of my own physical acts to a tertiary priority instead of the primary. And in doing so, I lost the ability to do those muscle ups. Where for more than a decade, on any given day, I would be able to do one without a single warm up. I could do 10 plus when I was focused and ready. All of a sudden, I had finally reached a point where I couldn't do one again. And I felt back to square one. And so while shooting exercise demo videos, I had to take a video demoing me doing this exercise. And I tried multiple afternoons, always just missing. And I happened to catch on video one that shocked me and it is a perfect testament to the stepping stone type of physical awareness and ability that I've been working to build. My awareness around my body was so high that even missing this attempt, I was still able to safely catch myself and control myself to the ground. Now, you might see that and say, oh, he's got really healthy shoulders. But what you don't realize is that I have in the past separated both of my AC joints. My collarbones have become temporarily disconnected from my shoulder blade right up here. I have dislocated this shoulder. I have popped it out of joint while body surfing after a hurricane. there's still at times symptoms of tearing of the cartilage in there. But my ability to be intensely aware of what my body is capable of and to be right at the edges is still safe, is exactly what I have been working to build to help everyone else. Because this is possible. The human body is not fragile. The human body is resilient. The human mind is not fragile. It is resilient. And if you build it correctly, it will serve you and all of those around you. But we need a path. We need a process. We need guidelines. We need redirection at times so that we can channel our own inner fire, our desire to be a better version of ourselves so that we can be maximally helpful to others. So I'm not showing you these videos to say, hey, look at me. I'm showing you these videos because I want you to say, I saw that and now I'm capable too. So every day, show up and do a little bit. Get a little broom, brush some pine needles, and take a seat when you need to. Feel the ease that comes from having done that little bit. No matter how overwhelmed you are, no matter how much you have to do, create a little bit of organization inside yourself. Create a little bit of organization around yourself. And those are the first steps to this greater journey. And as soon as you do, you'll feel the ease, you'll feel the space that you've created, and you're going to do a little more the next day. And so after that miss a couple of weeks ago, I've continued trying and finally got it back just the other day. You can see that here. All right, team, join the movement. Stay active.